My name is Helen Foster, I'm 59, a widow, and I live in a quiet suburb of Oregon. For almost 20 years, I've worked as an office manager at a law firm, keeping everything organized while making sure my two children, Clara, 32, and Ethan, 29, never had to struggle like I did. I sacrificed vacations, weekends, and even my own birthday celebrations so they could have security, opportunities, and comfort. I thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. Last Tuesday, that belief shattered. The email appeared in my inbox with no subject line, just Clara's name. I smiled automatically, imagining a cheerful note about wedding plans. I had already given $30,000 to help book the venue, hire a photographer, and secure her favorite florist. My heart lifted at first. Maybe she was excited to share updates. Then I opened it. "Mom," it read. Just that. No dear, no exclamation mark, nothing but her name as a label. She explained that she and her fiancé, James, had finalized the guest list for their Napa Valley wedding. After careful consideration, she said it would be best for me to watch via livestream. James's mother, she added, insisted on keeping the wedding intimate. And at the end, like a cruel joke, "If you want to watch, here's the Google Meet link." Should be just like being there. I stared at the screen. My coffee grew cold beside me. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. But something inside me shifted quietly, like the ground beneath my feet cracking open. I typed a reply and pressed send. 4 words, sure. Enjoy your day. No tears. No pleading. Just withdrawal. That email was the moment I stopped pretending my sacrifices mattered. Driving to work, the spring air was crisp, but I hardly noticed. My mind went back to moments I had long tucked away, Ethan's father dying suddenly when the kids were teenagers, bills scattered across the kitchen counter, and me, trying to figure out how to pay for groceries and college deposits. I had told myself there would be time for me later. There never was. Clara had changed majors twice, and I had paid for the extra tuition. When she moved across the country for a short-term job, I paid her rent and plane ticket. When Ethan and his fiancée wanted to buy a house, I co-signed and wrote the first $10,000 check. I never kept score. Mothers don't. But now, that email made me feel like a transaction. Useful, and now disposable. At the office, my boss Daniel noticed my distracted demeanor. He placed a latte on my desk. "Rough morning?" he asked. I nodded, smiled faintly, and said I hadn't slept well. He didn't press. That simple act of kindness reminded me I still existed, even if only quietly. By lunchtime, my phone was buzzing endlessly. Clara again. Texts, calls, voicemails. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk. This isn't funny." I didn't respond. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to not answer. That evening, I sat on the porch with my glass of red wine. I let memories crash over me, birthdays I planned alone, holiday dinners where I waited for a call that never came, vacations I postponed. The wine was bitter, yet comforting. And I realized something startling: I needed peace, dignity, and a life not dictated by being useful to people who only showed up when they needed something. After that first evening on the porch, I slept fitfully, but for the first time in years, I slept with a sense of purpose. Not hope that Clara or Ethan would understand, but clarity about myself. The next morning, the phone was relentless, 43 missed calls, dozens of texts. Some were frantic, some pleading, some passive-aggressive. "Mom, we need to talk. Why are you doing this? This is childish. Please answer." I ignored them all. For decades, I had been the one who always answered. I had been the fixer, the supporter, the one who made sacrifices quietly. Today, I was someone else. Someone who mattered to herself first. At work, Daniel noticed the tension in my jaw and the unusual stillness in my movements. "Lunch?" he asked, his voice gentle. That new Italian place just opened on Main Street. I hear the pasta is worth it. I hesitated. For years, I would have declined, saying I had too much work. But something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was the clarity of the past 24 hours, or the realization that life would keep moving whether I participated or not. I nodded. We walked across the street, the warm spring sunlight soft on our faces. Daniel talked about his grandchildren and the chaos and joy of keeping up with them. I listened, letting the ordinary, human stories wash over me. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to measure my worth by how much I gave. After work, I made my way to Riverbank Federal, the branch where Carlos, the manager, had guided me through college funds, retirement plans, and countless wire transfers. He greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Foster. What brings you in today?" I took a deep breath and set my purse on the counter. "I need to cancel the wire transfer to the Napa venue," I said, keeping my voice steady. Carlos blinked. "The $50,000 one?" "Yes. Circumstances have changed." He hesitated, glancing at the screen. "There may be a cancellation fee depending on timing, but let me see." He typed quietly, then looked up, eyebrows raised. "You're in luck. It hasn't processed yet." "Just in time." "Are you sure, Mrs. Foster? $50,000 is a significant sum." I nodded firmly. "I'm sure. That money is no longer my concern." Signing the forms felt almost revolutionary. For 20 years, I had given without questioning, assuming love meant self-erasure. Now, for the first time, I was giving to myself. By the time I got home, Ethan was pacing in the living room, looking disheveled, holding his phone like a shield. "Mom," he said, stepping inside before I could even speak. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Clara's freaking out." "Hello to you too," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. He ran his hands through his hair, voice rising. "You're not coming to the wedding now? You're being difficult." "I'm uninvited, Ethan." "Seems fitting," I replied evenly. He froze when I mentioned canceling the wire transfer. "Mom, they were counting on that." "The venue, the food, they're not my problem anymore," I said evenly. "You always make everything about yourself," he shouted, pacing again. I held my ground. A mother who was told to stay home and watch from a screen doesn't get to argue about priorities anymore. The door closed behind him quietly, but the weight that had been pressing on me for decades seemed to lift slightly. I realized I wasn't angry. I was free. That evening, as I sat back on the porch, sipping the wine, memories came flooding. Birthdays I spent alone, holiday dinners where I secretly hoped for a phone call, vacations I postponed endlessly. Each sacrifice, unnoticed and unacknowledged, was a thread in the fabric of my own invisibility. And I thought about James's mother, whose opinion had overridden my presence at my own daughter's wedding. I thought about Clara, whose email ended with "lol" as if my absence was a joke. And finally, I thought about myself not just as a mother, not just as a widow, but as a woman who had spent too long giving without pause. Late that night, there was a soft knock at the door. My heart skipped, but I didn't jump. It was Samantha, Clara's childhood best friend. She stood there quietly, brushing imaginary dust from her coat. "Mrs. Foster," she said softly, "I hope I'm not intruding." "Come in," I replied. "Would you like some tea?" We sat at the kitchen table. Samantha looked around the familiar walls like she was searching for echoes of the past. "I came because I didn't know what else to do." "Clara sent me," she began hesitantly. "She's a mess. She doesn't know how to fix this." "And you?" I asked gently. I wanted to ask, is there anything she can say or do to change your mind? I paused. Was there? Could an apology, a plea, or tears undo decades of being used, overlooked, and excluded? I shook my head slowly. "No words are easy, Samantha. especially when people are desperate. But the people who truly love you, they don't wait until you cut them off to see you. She nodded, quiet, thoughtful. Even if she doesn't understand? Yes, I said softly. Even if she doesn't. Sometimes love has limits. She stayed a few moments longer, then left quietly into the night. And I, for the first time in years, felt the peace of my own boundaries. The morning after Samantha's visit, the phone buzzed again, but I didn't move. 40 missed calls. A string of frantic texts. Clara pleading, cajoling, blaming, and negotiating. Mom, please. We've lost the venue deposit. We need the money to save the wedding. Can we talk? I let it ring. For years, I would have answered immediately, rushing to fix problems that weren't mine. Today, I didn't. Today, I let silence speak volumes. At the office, Daniel noticed my unusual calm. Helen, he said, pausing in front of my desk, you seem lighter. Is everything okay? I smiled faintly. Everything's fine. Just thinking. He nodded knowingly, then offered gently, sometimes the hardest part of love is setting boundaries, especially with the people we've given the most to. His words felt like a balm. For decades, I had measured my worth by my usefulness. Now, I was learning that boundaries were an act of love to self-love. By lunchtime, I agreed to join him at the new Italian restaurant. The pasta was indeed worth it, but more than that, it felt good to sit in a space that didn't demand anything from me, a space where my presence wasn't transactional. Daniel told me stories about his grandchildren, and I laughed, genuinely, without thinking of homework, bills, or wedding logistics. When I returned home that evening, I found myself lingering on the porch longer than usual, letting the cool spring air brush across my face. I sipped the remaining wine slowly, feeling the weight of decades of unacknowledged effort slowly lift. Then there was a knock at the door. I almost ignored it, but something told me to see who it was. It was Samantha again, holding her coat tightly around her. Mrs. Foster, she began softly, I wanted to come by one last time before everything happens tomorrow. Clara's trying to fix things. She's desperate. And? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I wanted to ask, is there anything she can say or do to change your mind? I shook my head. No, not this time. Words are easy. Apologies don't erase decades of being used or excluded. Presence cannot be bought or bargained for. Samantha looked down at her tea, nodding slowly. I get it. Even if she doesn't, I get it. She left quietly, leaving me in the stillness of my home. I realized, then, that for the first time in decades, I had permission to exist outside of everyone else's needs and expectations. The quiet was mine, and I didn't want to surrender it. The wedding came and went without me. According to Ethan, Clara and James ended up holding a small backyard ceremony, just a handful of relatives and James's parents. They scrambled to find a last-minute venue after losing my previously promised funds, and the stress was palpable. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I didn't feel a twinge of guilt, only a strange sense of peace. Weeks later, Clara sent me a long email, half apology, half justification. I read it once, then archived it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. For the first time in decades, I woke up in the morning without bracing for another guilt trip, without wondering who needed something from me, without calculating how much love or time I could give to others. I started doing things for myself. I joined a pottery class, spending slow, meditative hours shaping clay and losing myself in creation. I had dinners with friends who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could give them. I read novels, walked in the neighborhood, and let the small joys of life seep into my veins, filling the emptiness I had neglected for so long. Some days, I still thought of Clara. Some days, I felt a flicker of sadness, a ghost of the old expectations. But the sadness was different now. It was quiet, reflective, not clawing or demanding. I had finally learned a hard truth: you do not have to burn yourself to keep others warm. Freedom, I realized, was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was sipping wine on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. It was saying no without guilt. It was living a life that did not revolve around the needs of others. One evening, I sat on the porch, the sky painted with streaks of orange and pink. I thought of Clara, James, Ethan, and even Samantha. I realized that sometimes, the only way to be seen, truly seen, is to walk away from a story you no longer belong to. And in that quiet, with the birds chirping and the wind rustling through the trees, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from being needed, but the kind that comes from finally needing nothing from anyone but yourself. I raised my glass of wine and whispered to no one, "Here's to me." And for the first time in decades, I meant it.